Hello friend, it's great to see you and welcome back to the channel. Today, I'd like to talk about this game, Def Jam Fight for New York. This is a 2004 fighting game developed by Aki Corporation, who was well known for the WCW and WWF games that came out during the N64 era. So if you ever played a wrestling game on the N64, it was probably developed by the folks who went on to do Def Jam Vendetta and then later Def Jam Fight for New York. And Aki Corporation had a little bit of help from EA Canada in the process as well, which is kind of funny to imagine that EA at this time still had all these kind of broken out subsidiaries that kind of operationally worked and developed games themselves. Now you have these like bigger studios that work for EA and not specifically EA this branch, EA that branch, but what do I know? Maybe there is some of that still underlying the surface of EA. But a little bit about Def Jam Fight for New York. This is a underground fighting game where kind of hip-hop icons brawl for control of the city's street scene. And so you, as a character, will kind of rise through the ranks in these brutal battles and build your rep up and take on rap legends in a quest for dominance. So I don't play a lot of fighting games. It's just one of those genres that I'm not super good at, and I think a big part of it is that every fighting game is really its own niche, requiring a serious amount of dedication to learning the technicalities of that specific game. And I just play so many games, it's hard for me to dive in and commit to just a single one. So usually I'll pick up a fighting game and I'll play it for a little bit, and I'll probably get stomped on. But I felt like Def Jam kind of hit this good middle road for me where it was certainly made for a broader audience, but had the opportunity to invite such technical depth to the game. And so that was a big thing that I wanted to focus on when discussing the game itself. But a couple cool things about the game before we dive into the specifics about it. The game is very cool in that it features, as I mentioned, a huge lineup of hip-hop artists and actors, many of whom at the time were just in the peak of their fame in the early 2000s. So definitely relevant for me in 2025. I think a lot of these folks are still relevant, but maybe you just didn't grow up in that period. But you have people like Snoop Dogg, Method Man, Redman, Fat Joe, Ludacris, Busta Rhymes, Ghostface Killah, Exhibit, Lil Kim, Sean Paul. I mean, they're all here, and they're primarily characters fighting alongside you or against you in this title, which is super cool. But also there's people like Danny Trejo's here, Omar Epps, Carmen Electra, which is pretty sweet. So, you know, a lot of these celebrities too, they came in and voiced their own characters and contributed to their in-game person, including designing their custom finishing moves. So Def Jam Fight for New York, it really is an enigma in the sense of, I don't think a game like this could really get made in 2025 from the lens of just getting all of these personalities into the idea of getting beaten up virtually on a screen. You know, getting the licensing rights for their likenesses, their music, getting them all coordinated to be a part of the development of the game. It just sounds like something that nowadays just really couldn't happen. Though it would be incredible to see, you know, Kendrick Lamar and Drake facing off in Def Jam to see the true outcome of their beef, taking it beyond just the rap battles. But anyways, before we dive too much into my experience playing the game, I just want to show off the game, of course. Def Jam Fight for New York is a very rare game to get your hands on. It's pretty expensive nowadays, but here I have a pretty nice copy of the game, I have to say. Super clean. There's a couple of damages to the plastic cover itself, but the cover, it looks quite nice. On the front, we have a hooded man holding the city of New York in his hands. It's such a cool cover for a game. And on the back it says, fight for control of hip-hop's underworld. Hit hard with 5 fighting styles. Anything goes. Bats, bottles, pipes, and more. Watch your back because crowds get into the action. And featuring more than 40 hip-hop superstars. Super cool. And we'll pop open the case, and again we have that cover art piece represented. A little bit of an alternative art on the front of the CD as well. And I did dig through the manual a bit, but it's kind of one of these more kind of, I don't want to say cheaply printed ones, but it does have just kind of like the black and white print finish on the inside. It would have been cool if they had some more art and things going on, but the game mostly just explains to you how the controls work and the different styles of combat, which there are 5 different styles. And you know, that's about it. So we have the manual there as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get the game up on the shelf, and then let's dive into some of my thoughts, having played through the game, on what I thought about it. So the first thing I always like to talk about when it comes to any game is the gameplay itself. It's such an important aspect of the game. And so let's talk a bit about the mechanics. So this is kind of like a hybrid fighting system that's built in here. It takes place on a 3D space, and with these fighting systems, players can choose up to 3 of the 5. So there's street fighting, there's kickboxing, martial arts, wrestling, and submissions. And all of these play slightly different to each other in terms of the kind of moves that your character is going to be able to pull off when they're punching or kicking or grabbing. And so I thought that was really cool that over time, your character will begin to develop and fuse some of these various styles to create a very unique fighting style for that person. And the combat is very fast-paced. I mean, as soon as the action starts, sometimes you're already on the ground getting like your face stomped in. So I did quite enjoy just kind of the pace of the action. And there's some very cool things about Def Jam Fight for New York, such as the environmental interaction at play. You know, everything from slamming opponents into walls, or using weapons that the crowd may hand you, or getting a crowd member to like grab on to your opponent and then beat them up, and building up this momentum to then trigger these blazon moves is what they're called, where you kind of have this special either finisher or move that's going to really take some damage down on your opponent. It was all really cool to interact with. I did quite enjoy it, and for the most part the game plays quite slick. Though I will say that one of the things that I got caught up on quite a bit was that the same button is used when you're trying to lift up opponents and pick weapons up, and there would be times in a fight where the opponent was down on the ground, I wanted to say walk away and grab a weapon nearby or something, or vice versa, and I do the opposite of what I wanted to do. I'm trying to pick up a weapon and my character picks up the opponent, or trying to lift up the opponent and picks up the weapon. And so I do wish that there was a little more variation in terms of button use on the layout of the controls, just because there were a lot of controls available that didn't go as much used as I expected that they should. It didn't hamper on the gameplay experience, but mechanically I feel like it would have made for a smoother fighting system, I guess, overall, even though the game plays quite well, I have to say. So that's a bit about the mechanics, and structurally how the game works is that there's a core gameplay loop involving kind of winning these underground fights, and when you do, you're going to earn cash and development points. So after the fight, you then go and use these points to upgrade stats or unlock new moves, and then also purchase gear. And that's everything from clothing itself and how your character looks, to tattoos and jewelry, things that are going to build your momentum up so you can get to using those brutal blazon moves quicker. And so this was a pretty satisfying gameplay loop, especially from the core lens of you're trying to move in and out of these fights super quick, and you just want to interact quickly with and build up your character along the way. I think that the game very much accomplishes that well. I will say that for the currency of dev points, you use these to either stat build your character or to unlock new blazon moves. And especially early on in the game, you're going to want to max out and build up these stats as quick as possible, because they're going to, of course, allow you to just have a better general baseline for how your character performs in these fights. And the struggle with that is that I really wanted to use some of these new blazon moves. For the longest period at the beginning of the game, I just had one because I was mostly prioritizing building up my character's stats. And so I do wish that there was another alternative means of unlocking the blazing moves that wasn't also using the dev points, such as upon defeating an opponent and you get the unlock requirement itself, you then get a separate pool of points, or somehow you get an allocation of points that you can use towards buying these moves that's separate from the dev points. So it would have been something I would have liked, because it would create better flexibility and also enjoyment earlier on in the game when you were still struggling to decide, all right, am I going to build up my stats, or am I going to take a moment to focus on, you know, these different move sets and incorporating them into my character. Other big aspects of the gameplay itself are the interaction with the UI and navigating the world. So from a UI perspective, the HUD is pretty straightforward. You get a health bar, you get this dual layer system which has both your consciousness and your physical wellness, because your character can really be affected in a couple of different ways and taken out. Either just beaten up and just that's it, it's over and you're knocked out, or you're put into these various submission holds that will definitely wear down on your various body limbs and cause you to go into a point where, yeah, you're not knocked out, but you just can't continue any longer in the fight. So I did kind of like the dynamics of this, because depending on the fight style that you chose, you would have different avenues you could explore in order to get your opponent where you needed it to go. And from this, there's also momentum meters. So these fill up based on the charisma and performance in the fight, unlocking these blazing moves in the fight itself. So that's where it comes in, those tattoos, the jewelry. The better you're performing in the fight, you're just going to build that up and have more of these blazing moves per fight, which is going to be huge for your performance, especially later in the game. I will say one thing that was driving me crazy was every time basically that you left a fight, you of course unlocked new clothing, new jewelry, new dev points, and so you're constantly getting these text messages on your phone saying like, hey, come meet me, come train at the gym, come buy these new clothes that I got. But especially with the clothes, one thing that was challenging is that there was no real good way to see what was new. And really no reason to do so except for buying jewelry to increase that momentum meter and unlock those special moves during a fight, because otherwise it's all kind of aesthetic. So for the longest time, I think I just had my character in like a tank top and blue jeans before kind of getting more involved in the styling aspects of Def Jam Fight for New York, which are really its own aspect, because you can choose a variety of looks and styles that then in the 2000s and today kind of still look pretty cool and relevant, I think. The characters just overall look very impressive. So that's a bit about the interaction with the UI, and navigating this world is pretty straightforward because the game is quite just a linear experience. You go and navigate through the stylized menus, a version of New York's underground fight scene when you're up above. It's kind of like a subway map, I guess, where you're choosing the various places you want to go. And when you're in the actual fights, those are cool too. I mean, all of the different arenas are unique in that you could be anywhere from a subway station to a scrapyard, and each has various interactive elements that are unique to those levels too. The subway is the really crazy one because you can throw someone into the tracks and just ultimately end the fight right off the bat if that's what you wanted to do. One thing I would have liked, and I guess you can get this by free playing the game, but I would have loved kind of a training room. I think that a training room is super important for a fighting game because it allows you the opportunity to just flexibly and without much punishment involved, just kind of explore the mechanics of the game, understand better means by which you can strategize how you are using your character. And Def Jam Fight for New York has a lot of dynamic ways in which this changes throughout the course of the game for you as you unlock new fighting styles or you get new blazing moves. And it just would have been nice to have an arena in which you could practice those without constantly having to face somebody off. Maybe there is a training room and I just missed it, but I did not see one in the game, and I would have loved to have seen it. And if there is, I would have loved for the game to be a little more clear about where I could access that. So overall, those are some thoughts I had in the gameplay world. I did quite enjoy the fighting of the game. I enjoyed many of the gameplay aspects. It took me back to another time for sure, both with its characters, its style, and so on. And I just had a blast. It still feels very good to play, even 20 years later. The design elements that they chose for this were fluid and flexible, and I really appreciated that about it. So moving on from the gameplay, did also want to talk about the story. The story is super important to any game. So the narrative here really centers around concepts of loyalty, betrayal, rising through the ranks of an underground fight circuit. And you choose a custom character that you create, and he's rescued by D-Mob and joins D-Mob's crew. And you eventually have to face off against Crow's empire, and Crow is Snoop Dogg. And so it's kind of fun to just interact with Snoop throughout the game. I wonder if Snoop, I know he's a gamer, has been or ever played Def Jam Fight for New York. That'd be funny to see. But yeah, the story's pretty linear, but very immersive, I have to say. It has a lot of branching romance options and some dramatic betrayals, and you're forced to switch sides mid-game too, which adds kind of emotional stakes to the title. But yeah, it was super fun. I will say that the difficulty for the game seemed a bit random. You know, the narrative elements didn't really blend into what was happening next in the title. I mean, occasionally it did, but otherwise the game was seemingly kind of random, both from the narrative sense and the difficulty sense. Some fights would be super aggro, and then all of a sudden you kind of retry it and that fighter's chilled out. It is pretty easy to wreck. So the lack of discernible patterns for the strategy building made it harder to kind of be strategic and really absorb myself in the story. It's a very gameplay driven game, and I think you're just going to find that with fighting titles, right? But overall, the story is kind of there. You know, it's mostly just fun to see all these rappers just kind of interacting in this kayfabe world of fighting. So that's what I took from it the most. So a bit light on the story, my perspective. The story was interesting, but that's about all I can really say about it. So I'll move on to the sound. A licensed title such as this, and I say licensed title, but really it's a game composed of various licensed works, essentially, and the combination of so many artists and music and culture, really. But I have to say that sound is super important here, starting with the voice acting. This game is surprisingly solidly voice acted and written for a fighting game. You know, the characters all have very distinct personalities. The cutscenes are well directed, well written. And I think a big part of it comes into the play of having all of these artists involved off the bat and contributing so much to their voice lines that you really feel like everyone is very dynamic, especially Christopher Judge and Snoop Dogg, who are here in the title. They just do such great work. So not only that, but the sound effects are great. You know, everything from punches to slams, environmental damage sounds that are just so visceral and they're satisfying. And the bone-crushing effects are so memorable and super cool from a development sense, because to my understanding, the way that they did it is they took essentially just a paper bag and crunched it up in various ways and then reversed those effects back to make it sound like that. And it just does such a stellar job. I mean, it sounds so painful when some of these blazing moves are triggered. And the game has a standout, fantastic soundtrack, because you get all sorts of music from Method Man, Public Enemy, LL Cool J, and more. So it's like this perfect match of the game's gritty tone. All of these rappers have come together. The sound design team has done fantastic work over here. And so the sound really elevates this game from a musical sense, from a design sense. Without it, the game just wouldn't be the same to play. And so props off to everybody who kind of was involved in this title from a sound perspective. I think they really killed it here. They did such a great job. Last thing I want to add, and I like to see this in the scope of when the game was developed chiefly, but also I'll talk about the legacy of it as well, is kind of graphically, visually, and performance-wise, where this game was at, what it's accomplished, etc. So in 2004, by the standards of 2004, Def Jam Fight for New York is an impressive title. It has really great character models. The animations still look, to this day, very smooth and fluid. And so in 2004, they were quite impressive, so to speak. The facial expressions and the blazing moves are especially well done. Some of them even handcrafted to achieve the effects that they go for. And the environmental destructibility, something so missing from modern gaming, is that I thought it was going to be the future of game development, that you would be like Battlefield. Bad Company 2 was a perfect example where entire structures and environments you could just destroy and take out and change the landscape of the fight. Def Jam's not that dynamic, but it was cool to see that there was a lot of that destructibility at play and in thought for the development team when they made the game. So super cool and varied, and just overall very impressive to play, and still to this day felt impressive too. I will comment that a lot of the gameplay that you'll see recorded here I did play on PCSX2, I believe, and the reason for that was I was traveling at the time, so I took my little handheld Kishi Razor, I think is what it's called. It's a handheld gaming controller that I could hook into my phone, and then I could play on the go and enjoy the game and bring some more content to y'all. So that will probably affect my opinion of the graphics here, because of course you're kind of getting an upscaled, touched up look of Def Jam. But overall, I think after popping it in my PlayStation 2 and comparing it, while that might be the case, and again, on a retro tink, so take that into consideration, I thought the game just looked great and had a lot of fun with it. So graphically it's great. Performance-wise, I didn't really experience any glitches. I've heard it runs smoothly on all platforms, whether it's PS2, Xbox, GameCube, and the load times were very reasonable for me, and I had a good frame rate experience. That holds up even during the more chaotic kind of multi-fighter brawls in which there are multiple, opponents at a time on the screen, and that would be something you would expect would really slow down the game, but it doesn't. So they did a good job of optimizing the game and providing good performance, lacking in glitches and bugs and so on and so forth, at least for my experience. Alright guys, so that's a big part about what I wanted to say about Def Jam Fight for New York. I really enjoyed the gameplay. Fighting games are not my cup of tea, but this game really drew me into its world, into its characters, and into its style and design. It was so fun and interesting to play. On top of that, it had a serviceable story that just kind of carries the game along and pushes the narrative, which is nice. That's really all we need sometimes to enjoy the gameplay aspects of it. And it looks great. It sounds fantastic. I just really had a great time with this game, Def Jam Fight for New York. And I have to say that there's a reason why it's expensive and it's rare, and it's because it's fantastic. And so if you haven't played it, no matter the avenue in which you play it, I recommend to pick this game up and give it a try, because I would assume you're gonna have a blast, such as I did. So, all said, I'd love to know your thoughts about the game if you've played it, how you feel about it. Is it something nostalgic for you? Maybe it's something you're still kind of playing to this day. I've heard that plenty of times before. And otherwise, if you like the video, please like the video and subscribe. Would love to have you join this small community. And otherwise, again, stay well, stay healthy, and I'll see you next vid. All right, peace, guys.